You don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Dead up perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the fourth part of What If Naruto Meets American Dad? Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Dragon from Heaven on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Minutes earlier, Naruto smiled, walked over to Lisa and Haley to see that the two of them were still talking and was happy to see Haley with a smile on her face and grew curious about what the two were talking about. "Hey, you two, enjoying the party so far?" he asked as the two turned and smiled at him. "Yes, we are, Naruto, and so far I'm glad to see Mom be happy and making more friends around the neighborhood. By the way, I really love your stew, it's practically to die for," Haley said as she finished up her meal as she wanted to go back for another serving, but the 2 servings she had already had filled her up. "Yeah, and I've been having fun talking with Haley here since I know no one here," Lisa replied as she smirked at him. "That's good to know. So what were you two girls talking about anyways?" Naruto asked as he looked at the two of them. "Oh, just things like life, classes, family, and Haley considering joining our relationship since she already has a massive crush on you," Lisa said as Haley blushed and looked at Naruto. "Well, the thing is he has already asked me out to join and I said yes," Haley said as Lisa smiled happily and hugged Haley close to her. "Oh, I'm so happy," Lisa said as Haley hugged her back before Lisa turned to Naruto with a frown. "And why didn't you tell any of us?" she asked as he chuckled. "Well, I wanted it to be a surprise for everyone until Haley came over and spent the night again," he said as he kissed Lisa's cheek to make her calm down. "Next time no hiding it, I want to know who all is with you so I don't have to be careful around them. Plus with Lindsay joining we need to keep track of everyone," Lisa said as she stared at him slight frown. "Don't worry, I promise I'll let you know next time anyone joins," Naruto said as he looked up and saw smoke coming from the distance in the direction of the park if he remembered correctly. "Hey, is that a fire?" he asked as he pointed at the smoke while they followed his line of sight. They were about to respond until they all heard Stan shouting under attack. After the yell rang out, Naruto turned his attention towards Stan as he saw that the man was pointing towards Linda and Bob before he pulled out his guns and started shooting in the air, causing most of the neighbors to run away and into their homes. "Stan, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Naruto yelled as he stomped towards Stan with a heavily annoyed look on his face while Francine was getting extremely mad. "He's ruining everything. Do you have any idea how strong it was for me to finally start making friends, let alone getting this party to happen? How could you ruin my party in such a way?" Francine yelled as Haley tried to hold her mother back from attacking Stan. "Well, it was easy. I just yelled, 'terrorists,' and everyone ran away," Stan said back, not really noticing Francine's anger. "Oh, I thought you asked how did I ruin your party." "Yeah, after you started shooting up the place to make everyone panic," Naruto replied angrily as he glared at Stan and struggled not to punch the man straight in his face. "Dad, what you did was racial profiling. The memories had nothing to do with that fire, wherever it is, and everyone knows that," Haley said. "Those people are trying to destroy us and you want proof?" Stan questioned his daughter, somewhat insulted she questioned his judgment. "Yes," Haley blankly stared with the others giving Stan the same treatment as they thought Stan was going insane. "Fine. I'll go get some," Stan said as he ran off to prove that he was right. Naruto frowned as he looked back at Francine and saw she was venting to herself as she walked back and forth while trying to calm herself down and wondered if she was going to be alright after this stunt. He knew how much this meant to Francine as she hoped that she could get some more friends into her life, but with what Stan did could have ruined her chances. He could see how much she was starting to freak out over it as he pulled her into a hug to try and calm her down and got her to snap out of her pacing and venting due to her anger before she realized who was hugging her as she felt his sturdy frame, instantly calming her down and making her feel safe. Better? Naruto asked as he felt Francine nod as she turned and hugged him back to let loose some of her stress that Stan had caused her. I'm sorry this happened to you, Francine, he said as he pet Francine's hair before turning to Haley. Haley, mind getting her back home? I'll come by later to check up on her, he said as Haley nodded and she held her mother's hand and took her back home. Lisa, do mind getting our stuff from the meal table back home? He asked with a smile as she nodded. I'll come and help out with that, but I need to check on someone, Naruto said as Lisa nodded and gave him a quick embrace on the cheek as she left. Naruto frowned as he looked around for the memories in hopes that the two were okay as he headed over to where he saw them last and let out a small sigh of relief as they were still there and okay. Are you guys alright? Hope Stan didn't rile you too much, he asked them as they shook their heads. No, I think we're good. Just a little riled up there with the shooting and the panic from it all, Linda said as she smiled, happy that he was worried about them. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Usually Stan isn't. Okay, actually Stan is pretty much like this, but didn't expect him to snap all of a sudden, Naruto said as he rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. That's okay, Naruto, you don't have explain at all. This isn't the first time we had neighbors that were xenophobic, so we are used to this, Bob said as he shrugged it off. Still, I'm sorry this happened to you too and hope things can get better while you live here, Naruto replied as Bob nodded and Linda couldn't help but smile brightly at his caring nature. Oh, I think it will be with you here, Naruto, Linda thought happily as she felt her cheeks warm up. Well, I need to get going, need to check up on Francine after what happened, so I'll see you two later, Naruto said as he left the two behind. Well, that was nice of him and I can see he just scored a few points in your favor, Bob said as he saw Linda staring HRD on Naruto's retreating form longingly. Yes he did, Linda said with a smile before the two of them left to get back home. Days later. The next few days were a tad hectic with what had occurred after the block party, some good while some not so much. Naruto was able to go to the community college after classes one day with Tiffany and Haley so that he could get Tiffany signed up for classes and even settled Haley's debt with the college that had been caused by canceling her loan that she was forced to take after Stan cut her off financially. Tiffany was able to register for the next semester since it was too late to sign up for the current one, but she didn't mind at all since she was finally able to get a degree and start on the path towards a career she has always wanted. Naruto also made sure to help console Francine on the party incident as she was still unhappy about what occurred. On the bright side, the rest of the neighborhood was still there for her as numerous people came to visit. Greg and Terry visited her as well to help her out a bit even though they were unsure about Stan still. Linda also came on by to check up on her surprisingly after getting convinced by Bob to talk to a possible new friend. Linda even messaged him the day after the block party and the two ended up chatting for a bit of time, which made her very happy as they were getting closer. The problems though seemed to grow and become a headache as he tried to get them settled out, though it was all Stan's fault. It started with Stan wanting to prove that the memories were terrorists were starting to violate their privacy in many ways. First, Bob had actually caught sight of Stan rummaging through their trash in a raccoon disguise, which hardly worked at all, looking at their discarded, paid-off bills. The next one was when Stan had posed as a doctor when Linda was going through a routine health checkup and he was rummaging through her purse. The last, however, went a bit too far when he had installed security cameras in their home and he was watching them. He ended up barging in to kill a fly that was interfering with the video feed while he broke a few things along the way. After that, Linda and Bob had called the police and got Stan incarcerated at the county jail. Once he was put away, Linda called Naruto and asked if he could properly tear down the security cameras and erase the feed that was attached to Stan's van. He agreed and easily took it down before he confiscated Stan's van and put into one of his warehouses since he didn't feel like wasting the equipment. Linda was somewhat happy about it all since she got to spend time with Naruto, despite the circumstances, and she had even asked him if they could hang out sometime when he wasn't busy. She was nearly ecstatic when he agreed, and even though he ended up getting Francine roped into it so that the two could have days to hang out. Linda didn't mind that Francine came along since she would also get time to spend with her female crush, so she considered that a win-win scenario. She had even set up a weekly or bi-weekly hangout day, and Linda always grew excited for. Naruto was taken from his thoughts as he was thinking up plans for him to do with Linda and Francine on their get-togethers when he heard his phone ring and answered to see that it was Haley to say she had visited her father at the county jail. She even sent him a good blackmail photo of Stan being in female clothing, which was mildly hilarious, and told him that Stan had paid his bail, with him muttering that he has a plan to take care of things, and he felt worried as he felt Stan might get even more stupid. He frowned at Haley's text to come over to her house since she wanted to talk to him about something, and he thought in worry of some stupid act her father might do. He quickly texted her back before he went into his car and headed over immediately. Once he got there, Francine greeted him at the door with a smile. "Oh, hi Naruto, here to visit Haley," she asked with a happy tone that felt like she was also hiding something, but Naruto shoved that thought aside. "Yeah, is she in her room?" he asked as she nodded and opened the door. "Go on up, sweetie," Francine said with a smile as he went up the stairs, unaware of the frown and jealousy stirring in Francine. He smiled as he got to her door and knocked on it softly. "Who is it?" Haley asked from inside of her room. "It's Naruto, may I come in?" Naruto asked. "Sure, come in, door's unlocked," she replied back as he opened it. Once walking inside of the room, he was going to ask what's wrong until he saw a very interesting sight in front of him. Haley was laying on her bed wearing black lingerie that barely covered her mid-D cup melons up and were crotchless as she laid in a very stuck pose. Even to set the mood of the room, the curtains were closed to leave the room dimmed. "Do you like what you see, Naruto?" Haley asked as he nodded slowly and walked up to her, kissing her deeply before he pulled away. "What is all this for?" he asked, confused as she smiled up at him with a blush. "I wanted to make it official that I am a part of this group of yours, and to be honest, I haven't gotten you out of my head since the incident in the apartment," she said as he chuckled and kissed her again. "Well then, I better pay my dark-haired beauty the attention she deserves," he said as he took off his clothes in between deep kisses. The sight of Naruto in all his glory was almost too much for Haley. The most she had seen was her ex Jeff, and needless to say the difference between them was like an ant and a god. Haley smiled as she subconsciously licked her lips while thinking she was about to have her first real SXL experience and not one of those sad, pathetic times she had had with Jeff. Naruto smiled as he walked up to her bed and found he couldn't take his eyes off of Haley's CC body. He loved her curves, and if the way she was looking at him like a fish, she is enjoying the sight of him as well. "So do you like what you see, my beauty?" Naruto asked as he got on her bed and crawled towards her like a wolf about to pounce on a defenseless lamb. "Yes, very much so," was all that Haley was able to get out of her mouth before it was invaded by Naruto and his tongue. He wanted to drive her crazy with pleasure and passion, and she was more than willing to commit herself to losing her mind under his touch. Naruto was able to lay Haley down on her bed without taking his lips from hers. His tongue stroking around in her mouth, tasting every inch of her as her own tongue decided not to go down without a fight as she tried to compete with his. The difference in vigor and experience though was shown as he overwhelmed hers and massaged her tongue with his own as he enjoyed the moans that slipped from between their lips as they continued their passionate kissing. While this is going on, Naruto decided to keep his hands busy. He took his hands and ran them down her back, stroking her soft skin, and even felt her twitch under his touch before he kept traveling south till he felt her lush peach in his hands. He gave it a tight squeeze and felt her let out a soft squeak as he started to massage her peach, pulling her body up against his. He could even tell by the way she was kissing him more aggressively that Haley really enjoyed having her peach played with. As his one hand continued to explore her plump peach, his other hand ran up her stomach till he was all the way up to her generous mounds and started to caress them, stroking between his fingers as he felt her while he run his fingers around her ever-hardening tips. He loved watching her spasm and melt under his touch while he started to slide and give her now hardened tips some much-needed attention. Haley was loving the attention and care Naruto was giving her body. Her past experiences couldn't compare to what she was now enjoying right now. Before this amazing experience she would only have horrid FRPLY, if you could even call it that, and then it only led to being pumped in without skill for about 3 seconds before Jeff would finish and pass out. But this FRPLY and even by itself felt better than anything she had ever experienced in her life. She couldn't help but let out a few moans and whimpers as he continued to touch her peach and play with her. Strong tips. Please Naruto, give me more. I want to feel even more pleasure from you. Haley whimpered out, since as good as this felt, this was the time she was going to join his HRM, his family, and she wanted to feel it all and feel the kind of pleasure she would be drowning in from this point onward. Well, who am I to deny my goddess her pleasure? I want to hear that CC voice for me. So get ready to shout for me, Haley. Naruto told her as he pulled one of his hands from her sensitive BRST and began to run it down her stomach. Having an idea where he was going, Haley opened her legs wider to give him more room to reach her maidenhood. While not breaking eye contact with the panting Haley, Naruto made sure she could see the love and caring in his eyes as he kept going down till he finally come in contact with her exposed folds from her crotch-less panties. He smiled as he saw her arch her back and as he started to run his fingers on them. She was so tender right now that even his slightest touch seemed to be driving her over the edge. Enjoying the sight of his partner enjoying his touch so much, he wanted to give her more to see how she would respond. So while at the same time he gives her peach a strong squeeze, he took and slid 2 of his fingers into her tight PP. The thought of her lover was completely lost to Haley as she let out a deep as she felt Naruto use his fingers to do her. Recently the only thing she had had enter her had been a VBRTR she named Foxy, and that was only when she had thoughts of a certain blonde become too much and she needed release. But right now even just his 2 fingers felt so much better than the battery-powered toy she kept under her bed next to her bong. Naruto let go of her peach and got to the side of her so he could watch her twitch and JRK under the force of him pumping in and out of her. He smiled as he took a hold of her arms and pinned them over her head with one of his hands. Between her pants she looked up at him with wonder but mostly with lust-glazed eyes. All she could remember was him giving her a fox-like grin as she then felt him start to pump his fingers in her with such vigor and force it put her toy to shame. SSHT. Naruto, this F feels so good. D don't stop, P please. Keep digging deep into my pages, I want you to stir it up, baby. Haley, lost in her lust, shouted to her lover. Not thinking of her mother who could be somewhere in the house, and to be honest neither was Naruto. The only thing that mattered to him was the girl in front of him at this moment. Oh, is Haley being a naughty girl, and is she enjoying having a man toy with her special place right there in her bedroom? Tell me, how often do you pleasure yourself to the thought of me in this bed? How often do you try to stir up your PP just like I am doing right now? Naruto asked her with a clear smirk on his face, knowing he has her right where he wanted her, and him picked up the speed of his thrusting and reached around inside of her, which caused her to let out a gasp to replace all the air she lost during her moaning. Every night since the last time we were together. I daydream of you taking me every night. I can't help but picture you leaking deep inside me and giving me your baby batter. Haley confessed under the mind-numbing feeling of the growing orgasm coming her way. Naruto didn't even get a chance to respond to that very KNKY comment, as the next thing he knew was Haley lifting her peach fully off the bed as she started to shout about leaking as her PP contracted around his fingers as he felt a wave of her hot juices wash over his fingers, which of course didn't stop pumping into her as her wet PP and leg twitched under the force of her CLMX. Oh, someone was a very bad girl. I think this bad girl needs to be punished, he said as he turned her around and placed her over his lap with her peach sticking in the air. What are you going to do? She asked as she panted with a ragged breath from the feeling of the orgasm crashing into her. Like I said, I'm going to punish you for leaking so suddenly, and like any bad girl needs a good spanking, he said as he raised his hand before bringing it down to slap her rear. The second his large hand made contact with her fleshy rear end, it caused a shot of pleasure to shoot through her body. Haley let out a loud mmm as she didn't expect the amount of pleasure that coursed through her to be so powerful. She knew from what she heard from Lisa that Naruto's slaps on the rear were very pleasurable, but she didn't know it was this good. She had never been spanked before, and this was all new for her, and she definitely liked it. The force seems to travel through her body and seem to stimulate the area around her deepest part, the part of her that makes her into a true woman. The force of his slap sent a shockwave through her body and seemed to shook and simulated the area all around her womb, causing unimaginable pleasure to Haley. Unbeknownst to the two, the door was cracked open slightly, and if the two looked through it, they would have seen Francine staring right through it. She was going to use the restroom until she heard the noise from Haley's room, and being any concerned parent, she went to check up on her daughter since it sounded almost like a scream. She opened the door slightly and peered inside and saw something she didn't expect at all. Naruto was in all his naked glory, with several scars on his lean and muscled body, with a partially naked Haley laying over his lap getting spanked. Even more so, Haley was moaning in pleasure like crazy as she could see her daughter dripping wet from behind. The sight of her reddening cheeks as she sees the clear liquid running down between her daughter's legs, showing her that the act was RSNG Haley more than she ever thought the act would. Even from what Francine could see of Haley's face was giving off of clear signs of pleasure as her eyes slightly rolled back and bit her lower lip. Francine could only watch with drawn breath as Naruto's hand rise in the air and stay there for what seemed like minutes before coming down with force, clearly not enough to harm her but enough to show that he wanted Haley to know he was the one in charge. When it made contact, Haley's plump peach jiggled like it wouldn't ever stop as she shot her head up and let out a primal mmm that could have turned the straightest of women on hearing it. You have been a bad girl, and bad girls need to be punished. Go on and say it, Haley. Say you are a bad girl and you want to be punished. Naruto said to Haley in a voice clearly laced in lust. He wanted her, but he wanted to hear her say it. He wanted her to beg for him to take her, and he will keep spanking this perfect peach until she does. I am a bad girl. And need to be punished, so please spank this naughty girl's peach again. I need it. Please don't stop. Haley yelled out with a mmm as she lifted her peach off of Naruto and started to jiggle it in the air, causing the juices dripping out of her to run down her legs even more. Francine couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her baby girl was begging to have her peach spanked. She even seemed to enjoy the feeling of having her peach being abused and punished by Naruto. Francine could only look to between Haley's reddened peach and Naruto's hand. She could only think about how it would feel to have that hand come down on her own peach. The thought caused her to become very wet. She couldn't believe she was still here watching her daughter and her boyfriend during such a personal moment, but it had been so long since she had such pleasure and passion, and from looking at them Haley is getting all of that at once. She couldn't hold back anymore. Even if she is a mother, a wife, she was still a woman and had her own needs and wants. She bit her lip as she slowly lifted her skirt and slid down her and started to pleasure herself at the sight of her daughter being spanked as she begged for more punishment. Naruto, thinking she had had enough, he let Haley up and laid her back down on the bed as he looked down on her before kissing her full lips as she returned the embrace hungrily. Clearly she was more than ready for more. Seems that you deserve a reward now before we get to the main course. Would you like that, Haley? Naruto whispered out as he pet her peach softly and smiled at her. Yes, please, I would love that very much, Haley moaned out in between ragged breaths. Naruto smiled as he got off the bed after he flipped Haley over with her stomach lied on the mattress and kneeled down before he pulled Haley's red throbbing peach towards him and her legs dangling off the bed. Haley was wondering what he was doing next since this was all so exciting. Her thoughts were soon interrupted as she felt his cool lips up against her peach cheeks as she let out a squeak and mmm as the cool sensation was a great feeling against her hot peach. Naruto was kissing her reddened peach while occasionally eating it to excite his current partner, and by the way Haley is moaning would show he is doing it right. He continued to embrace her peach all over before he spread her cheeks to reveal her spasming peach. And no, don't lick there. It's dirty, Haley barely said in between her moans as they betrayed her on this new sensation of her peach was being slightly stretched out. That's where you're wrong, my dear, it looks perfectly clean to me, he said as he moved closer, and before Haley could react it let out a soft quivering as she felt his wet tongue enter her peach. As he was invading her back door with his tongue, her peach had a mind of its own as it started to pull away from him even though Haley was moaning in pleasure. Naruto though was able to hold it in place, making it harder for his prey to get away, while Haley's mind was starting to go blank in response to this incredible feeling. Through the other side of the door, Francine was raggedly panting with a reddened face as she was seeing such actions going on in front of her while she continued to finger and play with her pages. Her legs were starting to feel numb, with her starting to tremble as she had to resist the urge to burst in there and demand Naruto do all of that to her, being married be damned. Why do I keep peeking on my daughter and Naruto, she thought mildly as she continued to play with herself, while even going so far as to pull out one of her melons and SCK on it. But this wasn't enough, she wanted to feel what Haley is feeling right now as she pulled her dripping wet fingers out of her PP and started to reach towards her rosebud. She couldn't wait anymore, so she inserted one of her fingers into puckered hole and started pumping in and out of herself. After a few minutes of invading her peach with his tongue, he decided that it was time to go all the way with Haley now, as he could already tell by the way she was quivering she had came several times. Naruto leaned forward with his chst lying on her back and moved in to whispered into her ear. Honey, I think it might be time to go all the way. Is that fine with you? Yes, please. Nothing will make me more happier, Haley said as she felt Naruto get off her back. Her heartbeat started to beat faster with the anticipation of what she knew was about to happen. Naruto smiled at her as he brought his member and lined it up with Haley's lower lips before he started to move it back and forth against it to make sure it was very lubricated before he started to slowly insert himself into her. Bit by bit, inch by inch, he started to get deeper and deeper inside of her as Haley started to catch her breath as Naruto got further in. He waited for a bit so that she could adjust to his size with how much he had inside, since he had pushed nearly 10 inches inside her. Let me know when you feel ready to go, Haley, I don't want to rush you, Naruto said as Haley nodded in response. She appreciated him wanting to wait for her to finish adjusting to his size since it was so much to take. Okay, I'm ready, Haley stated as she started feeling him move slowly in and out of her. With each push and pull, she started to breathe more and more with the sensation coursing throughout her entire being. Faster. Harder. Please just F me until I lose it, she moaned out as she clenched the bed strong as she used it to ready herself for the pounding she was about to get. With each continuous slam into her, she was feeling countless jolts running through her, with his pelvis slapping her rear end, making it feel like being F and having her peach slapped all in one motion, but it wasn't enough. Please Naruto. Spank me strong. Haley demanded as Naruto smirked. As you wish, my dear, he said as he brought one of his hands up and brought it down faster and harder than he did earlier, making Haley jolt and spasm more and more by each hit. Yes. Yes. More. More. I must have more. Haley yelled, no longer caring who heard her as she needed this desperately. This went on for a bit longer, with sweat dripping off of both of them as the room grew hotter. Her peach cheeks were now blazing red from the ongoing spanking and she couldn't get enough of them. Her mouth was opened and panting like a dog. Not just any dog, his beach. She was his beach in heat and proud of it. After this went on for a bit, Naruto thought up of something with a smirk as he thought up some more fun. Haley, I was wondering, but have you ever done it anally? He questioned, and Haley shook her head, barely able to bring out any words from her mouth. And no, I have never done such a thing ever. I'm a backdoor version, she said as she brought her arms behind her, reaching for her peach cheeks and spread them to show Naruto her spasming glee. Would you like it? Would you like to pop my black cherry, Naruto? Haley panted out as she nearly wanted this nearly as bad as she wanted to get spanked. Why yes Haley, I would like that very much, Naruto said as he slowly pulled himself out of her tight PP and rubbed his length in between her peach cheeks for an peach job. Please, I want it so badly, she whined out before she let out the loudest she had yet from the surprise of him entering her so suddenly. He didn't say anything else as he slowly inserted himself into hole. Haley's eyes grew wider as he entered more and more of his member in her as she could feel her peach start to stretch out. Without giving her any warning, he slowly pumped in and out of her. He made sure to make each action more pleasurable than the last as he started to go faster and harder with each move like he did before when he was inside of her PP. Haley was totally red in the face and was sweating up a storm as she bit her pillow to try and hold back her loud moans that continued to pour out as with each move he sent jolts of pleasure through her. "God, I'm going to break. More please, just more," she moaned out as he grabbed her peach strong in his hands before he moved every 12 inches in and out of her, slamming it back into her with as much force as he could do. "You like that, don't you, Haley? Me wrecking your peach?" "Admit it," he said as Haley's eyes were starting to roll to the back of her head and trying to keep herself conscious. "Yes, I do, I love it very much. Please F my peach. Spank it. Dig your nails into it. Make me your beach," she screamed out as she let out a loud as he spanked her peach strong again while he continued to F her peach. Outside of Haley's door, Francine was sweating strong and was breathing in and out in rapid succession, seeing her daughter's peach being violated. She ended up seeing herself in Haley's position being ruined forever and no other man being able to please her correctly. Her mind somewhat drifted to her husband and was wondering where he or anyone else in the house was, but she slowly started not to care. All she wanted was to continue watching her violated daughter being pummeled and leak from watching this sight that made her pee soaking wet while she was doing both of her openings. After a bit of time he was curious on what her face was looking like right now, so he decided to flip her over while he was still inside of her peach, making her feel it churn her peach from the inside. He bent down to get closer to her face before going to her ear. "You have such a salty look on your face," he whispered in her ear as her tongue was out of her mouth and her eyes were half rolled back into her head. "You want me to fill your peach with my hot juices?" he asked as she shakily nodded her head. "Please, make this SLT leak, I want everything," she whispered out as she was exhausted from her loud moans and screams. He soon brought his lips to hers and the two had the raunchiest embrace they ever had of exploring every part of their mouths. Both of them were feeling their end now and couldn't believe of how long they had held themselves. I am going to leak. I'm going to leak," Haley barely managed to say as Naruto nodded in response. "I can't hold out much longer," he replied back to her as he grabbed and dug his fingers into her peach for leverage when he lifted her up and she ended up sitting on his lap. "Please, do it inside. I beg you, I need you to fill my peach with your juices," she said as he once again nodded. Haley's eyes rolled back into her head as she was lifted up and dropped onto his PP, piercing every inch of it inside her before she let out a loud Naruto/Haley, they both moaned out incredibly loud as they both came with Haley spraying her juices onto his chest and face while she was feeling her insides with each pump of his hot seed as she swore she felt it fill every inch of it. They looked deeply into their eyes as they fell back onto the bed and shared a love-filled embrace. While this was going on, Haley could feel his seed seep out of her spasming glee even as his member filled her up and she loved it. She tried to squeeze her peach shut to keep his warmth inside but it was no use at all, so she had to give up on the attempt. "I love you, Haley Smith," Naruto said, making her snap out of her concentration and made her tear up slightly as she was extremely happy from hearing it. "I love you too, Naruto Uzumaki," she said back as the tears slowly fell from her face. From outside of the door, Francine had climaxed from seeing the end result of what happened and there was a large-sized puddle of her juices on the floor as she also sprayed juices on Haley's door. I can't believe it. That really happened. That really happened," was all that Francine could think of with the image of Naruto and Haley climaxing was burned into her head. Once she was able to focus again, she realized of what her current situation is right now and started to freak out. She quickly made sure to clean up before anyone noticed what she had done as a dark red blush filled her face before she quickly needed to get her mind off of it. She quickly went into the shower after she quickly cleaned up her mess, and the blonde who was currently laying with her daughter was all she could think of, no matter how strong she tried to get him out of her mind. She even remembered her embrace with both Haley and Naruto, the fact she made him grope her, and even when her daughter gave him that amazing BLWJB a while back when she thought she was a teenager again. "Naruto, you're driving me crazy and it's starting to scare me," she thought as she rinsed herself off with a slight frown. It didn't help that she started to slip her fingers inside of her again with him in her mind and repeating the process all over again. The two were breathing steadily, trying to calm down their beating hearts from the experience the two of them had experienced. They lost track of time of how long the two of them were lying against each other, but they didn't care as long as they were basking in their moment. Haley had never felt so complete in her life, and Jeff had nothing compared to what Naruto had done to make her so fully satisfied. She smiled as he ran his hands through her hair while she drew circles on his chest with her finger. I could literally get used to this," Haley thought as she brought her head up and kissed Naruto again, loving the feeling of his lips against hers. "You, sir, know how to please a woman. You even ruined me for other men." "Not that I would ever go to anyone else ever again," she said to him as he chuckled. "Well, I aim to please, my lady," he said as she let out a content sigh. "Even though I can go another round, I don't know if I want to go again right now. I'm worried that we might have been a bit too loud and gotten noticed," Haley said, making Naruto nod in response. "I agree, Haley, we could definitely go again, but would be better if it was back at your other room and consummate our relationship more in there," Naruto said, making Haley blush on breaking her room more to make things more intense. "I would actually like that a lot, Naruto," she said as she giggled when she kissed him back on the idea. Their moment was somewhat ruined when they heard the doorbell ring. Their curiosities getting the better of them, slowly got up from the bed and went to the door and put their ears against it to get a better hearing of what's going on. They soon heard Stan talk to the memories, and this got the two of them worried, so they started getting dressed so they can get downstairs to see what Stan is up to. "I've acted horribly to you guys. I'm sorry you're terrorists." They heard as they came downstairs, seeing Stan shove the memories into the backyard. The two were astonished and very worried on what they saw. About a dozen-foot-high electric fence, autopilot machine guns, security cameras, and several other things that had made the Smiths' backyard into a prison camp. "Stan, you turned our yard into a prison camp?" Francine frantically asked Stan. "Detention center, Francine. By keeping them here, they can't strike again," he replied, gaining angry looks from the memories. "You can't do this," Bob yelled at Stan. "Aha. The United States Patriot Act says I can," Stan tauntingly replied, holding up a copy of said Patriot Act. "Stan, let them out. You know DMN well know this is not funny." Naruto yelled as he ran up to Stan as he had quickly gotten dressed while Haley had to get a bit cleaned up due to their earlier activities. Oh, Linda's making a run for the gate," Stan said happily, making Naruto quickly look towards the woman as she ran, hoping for an escape. Her luck ended as she painfully screamed when she was being electrocuted. "Linda!" Naruto yelled as he pushed Stan out the way and tried to go through the door, but it was not normally locked. "Stan, open this door right now!" Naruto roared angrily as his eyes flashed red for a brief moment, like they rarely did when he was angry due to his connection to Kurama. "Dad, what you're doing violates every tenet of a rational and just society," Haley said as she exited the house with a slight limp that she only made slight as she used the wall to support her before she yelled towards her father as he just shoved that comment off. Linda, are you okay?" Naruto yelled as he saw her shakily stand up. "I'm okay, I think," Linda said as she was twitching with a few electrical sparks jolting out every few moments before it died down. "Oh, don't worry, I didn't set the voltage that high," Stan carelessly said before Naruto narrowed his eyes at the man, as he nearly punched him straight in the face. "Naruto, before you break Stan's face, please talk to me for a second," Francine asked as she gently grabbed Naruto's hand and gently pulled. As Naruto was being pulled along, Francine was fighting her immensely powerful urges to throw him into the closest room or closet, locking up the door and having her way with him. But at this moment she had to roughly push those aside with what is currently going on. I think I know a way to get everyone out of danger and make Stan lose his power, Francine said as she gave him a smirk while he mirrored her smirk. I'm listening, but only if I get to hurt Stan a bit, he said as she held out her hand. Deal, she said quickly as she shook his hand with a smile. Now, you are going to have to do a bit to deactivate the electric gate since I don't know where it's powered to, but after that he will lose all power, she said as he smiled. Before their chat could continue, it was soon interrupted when they saw the front door open and pretty much the entire neighborhood was coming through the house, which was led by Haley with Stan following shortly behind trying to stop them. The neighbors were soon trying to get through the sliding door, but they were able to break through it with enough force they were putting against it before it gave way. Stan somehow was able to get in front of the group once they were in the backyard. Hey, back off, back off. Stan said as he was walking back towards the pool with the angry mob comprised of the neighborhood was ganging up on him to beat the living hell out of him for going too far. Don't you all get it? Since they have been locked up, there hasn't been one single attack, Stan proclaimed before a sound got everyone's attention. Looking around they all noticed that everything that was powering the prison camp/detention center was shutting down. What do you know, the power went out, Naruto said out loud. Seems I won't have to find the power source now. Thank you whoever you are that did this, he thought with a smirk. Oh, my God, they've struck again. Stan worriedly said as he was looking throughout thinking the terrorists are at it again. The memories? They've been here the whole time, Haley stated towards her father. That can only mean they're part of a larger terrorist cell, Stan said as he grabbed Haley before running inside with Francine and Naruto following behind. What are you doing? Francine yelled in anger as she grabbed Stan by the shirt and shaking him roughly. The memories have clearly recruited others. They're like vampires, or the gays, Stan said getting Naruto to raise an eyebrow on that last sentence. Okay, what is in that messed up head of his that is making things sound ridiculous, he thought as he shook his head in exhaustion. Could you get any more insane? Haley said. Quick, plug your peach with this clove of garlic, Stan said getting Haley and Francine to pause and start blushing on the thought with remembering of what happened earlier. BTTPLG. In Haley. KNKY, Naruto thought as he shook out the thoughts, but the idea of putting a peach plug in her was now making Naruto get strong again. Unknown to him, Haley and Francine were thinking the same thing in actions with the same blonde in mind for who would shove it in. Haley was the first to react and swat the clove of garlic out of Stan's hand. You can't imprison the entire neighborhood, she said with a groan as she left. Until I figure out who's behind this, no one's going anywhere. Stan declared before hearing a gun get off its safety as he turned around he saw Francine with a gun in her hand. Francine, what are you doing? Naruto yelled in shock as he saw her pointing a gun toward Stan and he grew somewhat turned on by the sight of Francine take charge with a gun in her hand. Let em go Stan. It's been a fun ride, but it's over, she stated as she kept the gun pointed at him. Come on, Francine. Not this old routine, you know, you pull a gun, I pretend I'm gonna do what you want, then I pull out my gun, Stan said as he whipped out his own gun and pointed it towards Francine. We do our little John Woo standoff. Inevitably, your arm gets tired then you drop your gun, and we have nobody got shot section. Francine was about to drop her gun until Naruto grabbed it from her hand gently before pointing at Stan. Oh yes Stan. What about when I pointed at you? Especially when I am trained by my godfather to wield a gun, he said using his godfather to cover up his CIA training. But you're not worth the bullet no matter what CRP you pulled, Naruto said as he quickly closed the distance between him and Stan and brought the pistol across his face and knocked him to the ground. Hey, where you going? Francine. Well, why'd you pull a gun on me if you didn't want to have SEC? Stan asked while trying to nurse his face as Francine picked up his discarded pistol before she moved to stand next to Haley and Naruto in the other room. Naruto, that was so hot what you did there. Oh, I don't care if we did it earlier, I want to do it right here, right now, Haley purred out seductively and whispered as she trailed her finger down his chest as he chuckled. Maybe later tonight at my place, honey, he whispered in her ear and nibbled on it before turning to Francine. So what should we do now, Francine? I mean, the power for that prison is shut down and you didn't even tell me on what the next step of your plan, Naruto asked as Francine smiled. Well, I think now could be a good time to possibly do a redo on the block party that was ruined earlier this week. You see, all I wanted was to reconnect with the neighbors, and then paranoid Stan locked them up in the backyard. It's like the world's worst pool party out there. But then I realized that this could turn around to be the world's best theme party, she said as Naruto smiled once he realized where she was going. A terrorist detainment camp theme party? Naruto asked with a smile as Francine nodded. They probably won't think we'd really lock up our neighbors. Plan is we switch this all around in our favor and get the neighbors to love us again, and our reputations will not only get fixed but improve depending on how things go, Francine stated, getting Naruto and Haley to smile and nod, being able to follow the plan. Mom, you're a genius, Haley said as Naruto couldn't help but agree on how she had thought this up on the fly. Now to get this all perfectly set up we'll need to get food prepared and to get some decorations, she thought as Naruto smiled. I still have leftover stew at home and I can think of one decoration that can work perfectly, he said with a smirk. Good, good. That will work very well. Now while you two get the decorations and food, I'll try to fix things here until you two are back with some leftover party food I have left, Francine said as the teens nodded, but before they left Francine held them off for a moment. Oh, and to possibly fit with the idea I think I know you have on decorations, I'll need you two to dress for the occasion. So wear your best swimming attire and come right back here pronto, Francine said before running up to her room to get changed. Following her orders, the two quickly ran to Naruto's car and he sped towards his home to quickly get things ready. They were able to get the food into the car with the proper equipment and grabbing whatever suitable attire they could find and quickly speed back in nearly no time. Once back at the Smith's backyard, they saw Francine in her swimsuit attire of a purple flowered bikini with a blue background with a matching waist wrap, wearing purple heels. She was doing her part and was convincing the neighbors that this was all a setup for the theme party they talked about earlier. Naruto had to struggle not to stare at her as the bikini looked gorgeous on her, worked with her figure unbelievably. Once getting the equipment set up and warming the food, Haley and Naruto went back inside to get changed. Naruto wore an orange and black swim trunks with a flame design coming from the bottom with an open short sleeve white shirt. Haley on the other hand somewhat mirrored her mother's attire from wearing a purple bikini with a red trim and had a see-through black waist wrap with black heels. Along with wearing her signature headband, which in his opinion looks great on her regardless. You look amazing, he whispered to her as he kissed her softly and smiled at her. You don't look half bad yourself, she replied. You know, if we weren't doing this now I would just rip those trunks off and do it in the pool, she said as she bit her lip and trailed her finger down his bare chest. I was thinking the same thing. Of course I do have a hot tub in my backyard we could use tonight if you want, Naruto replied back, making her nod furiously in response. Deal, but no anal for a while since I don't think I can handle it. For now let's focus on fixing this situation in our favor, she said as she rubbed her peach that was still a bit sore with a chuckle. Agreed. Now let's make those drinks for our guests. I think in this kind of theme we should make it tropical. Any thoughts? He asked as she shook her head. No, you got it right on the ball. I'll do the strawberry margaritas while you do the bananas, Haley said as they got right into their duties. After finishing things up they passed out the bombing drinks while everyone else was serving themselves Naruto's stew, and pretty much so far they have saved the party. Of course Naruto's main concern now was finding Linda, since he wanted to see if she was alright for quite some time. He soon found her and Bob interacting with the neighbors in a better mood than before and he rushed towards her. Linda. Oh, thank God you're alright. I was so worried after what happened to you earlier. Naruto said as he was hugging her tightly and held her close, making her blush furiously. I am fine, Naruto, thanks for asking," she replied back before she very reluctantly pulled away from his warm embrace. She soon stared at his current attire and couldn't help but blush harder of what she was hugging mere moments ago of his half-naked attire and seeing his muscles that left little to no imagination. She swore that she could probably happily die now with that being her last image running through her head and she wouldn't care at all. Regaining her composure, she got out of her la-la land and smiled at him. "So what's going on with all of this?" she asked as she pried her eyes away from his Adonis-like abs and looked him in the eyes. He soon explained to both Linda and Bob on what went on, that Francine just wanted to reconnect with her neighbors after one of the neighbors died half a year ago. This motivated her into wanting to get back together with the neighbors and rekindle her relationship with them and forge new ones. Of course, with what happened with Stan ruining the last party and causing the problem earlier today, that she wanted to turn things around. All in all, she got things turned out for the best out of a bad situation. Linda couldn't help but think that Francine was really smart to come up with all this in a really crappy situation right on the fly. There must be more to Francine than meets the eye, and she can't wait to know more about her. Their conversation was soon interrupted when a police officer came into the backyard and was questioning Stan about the supposed blackout from earlier and found Stan's CIA-issued hoodie with his name sewn into it. Being the idiot as he is given the situation, he thought he was actually behind all of the terrorist attacks recently through brainwashing. "Have you completely lost your mind?" Haley asked as Naruto came up to her. "The question we should really be asking is, when he actually lost his mind, and I think that was quite a long time ago," he replied back, getting Haley to giggle at her boyfriend's response. Ignoring Naruto's comment, Stan replied back to Haley's question. "It's the only logical explanation." Haley grabbed the jumper cables. "I have a prisoner to interrogate," Stan said with determination. Getting where this is going, Naruto jumped into the opportunity to get payback against Stan on the various stuff he did ever since he moved here. "Oh, let me do it instead. Besides, I don't think you could properly interrogate yourself with the self-torture," Naruto responded as Stan dumbly nodded in response. "Good idea." Stan soon went to the tool shed and opened the door before giving an announcement. "A patriot and a terrorist are going in there, and only one of us is coming out." Yeah, get in there you peach," Naruto interrupted Stan's little speech as he shoved him. "We have to start the torture, interrogation." "Yes, interrogation," he said with a smirk as he closed the door behind him, making Francine, Haley and Linda feel they just came a bit from him, giving off the powerful vibe. So authentic. "I love a man that can commit," Greg said as Terry rolled his eyes around. "Oh, not this again. I told you, as soon as my father dies, I will wear the ring," Terry said as the interrogation process began. Sounds of screaming, punching, cutting and electric shocks filled the air that made others thought that if this wasn't a party, they would be very worried. Even sounds of sadistic laughter came through which made others unsettled. The neighbors could only imagine what was going on in there if this was even real. After a few minutes, Naruto walked out looking just as he went out as he bowed to the crowd as he held up a recorder as they clapped and chuckled as they figured that was where all the sounds were coming from. Oh, only if they knew the truth. Before Francine walked up worriedly and peered into the room and let out a sigh as she was expecting a lot worse. Sure, Stan was pretty beat up, but he would heal, especially when what he did was very terrible to the neighbors. "Give him a month and he'll be back to normal self, but for now let's enjoy ourselves," he said as he slung his arm over Francine's shoulder, making her blush at the contact as she smiled and nodded. Linda saw this action Naruto did and couldn't help but feel jealous for some reason, wanting him to do that to her. She quickly walked over to Francine. "And Naruto," as she smiled, "can I head home real quick and grab my bathing suit?" she asked as Naruto nodded. "The more in the pool the merrier," he said out loud as he smiled as the other neighbors heard this, so they all left for a moment to run back to their homes to properly change and freshen up before coming back. During this time, Naruto had gotten Francine and Haley to help move Stan's unconscious body inside of the home out of prying eyes, just in case if the neighbors were nosy and started looking around. Linda and Bob were the first ones to come back, with Bob wearing a regular pair of green swimming trunks and sandals. Linda on the other hand had a bathing suit on that made her look like a goddess. It was a golden-colored one-piece bath suit that had a V cut to it to show off her shapely low D-cup melons and kept her back fully exposed with a hole in the front to show off her stomach as well. She even wore a copper-colored silk waist wrap to finish the ensemble with a regular pair of sandals. "Wow, Linda, you look gorgeous," he said as Francine nodded as Linda blushed as she did a little twirl as he could see under the wrap and was impressed by how the bathing suit made her rear look so plump. "Why, thank you, Naruto, it's good to wear this every now and then. Even surprising that this still fits since I last wore this a few years ago," she replied, feeling Naruto gaze her body more intently and loving every second of it. "Well, I think you look amazing in it, like a goddess," he said as she blushed and giggled at him with a smile. "Well, all that aside, I think we should party," Linda said as other neighbors were coming back wearing the appropriate attire. Throughout the rest of the day, the party went on for several hours till it got dark and the party started to die down. The music was playing with torches being lit up to set the mood and keep it on for as long as possible, but it had to come to an end. The only people left at the party were Francine, Haley, Naruto and Linda as they were cleaning things up. Bob had left early due to not feeling good with eating too much food, but he wished Linda good luck scoring Naruto, which got her to blush madly from it. Francine was able to get a phone call from Steve from where he was at all day that he was hiding out with his friends to cool down from some kids that were chasing after him for some reason that he didn't want to explain. Roger unfortunately tagged along on the run before he left and did his own thing with a different disguise. Of course Roger did tell her that the run ended and they crashed into the main power breaker in town and caused the blackout, which Francine couldn't help but silently thank them for doing all that. "So Francine, this was a great success, wouldn't you say?" he asked as he smiled and picked up a few bowls from the table as Haley relaxed in the lounge chair since she was still exhausted from their activities earlier. "Yeah, and I have you to thank for helping," Francine said as she was about to pull him in for a hug before Linda waved to them. "I have to go, it was great being with you guys. Also, are we still planning to hang out later this week?" Linda asked, which Francine gladly nodded. "Oh, definitely," Francine said as they finished cleaning up. "Oh Mom, I'm going to sleep over at Naruto's place tonight. I'll be back in the morning," Haley said as she quickly started to head inside to pack. "Okay, have fun Haley, and you better watch her Naruto," Francine said as he nodded. "Oh, I will Francine, and I hope things did turn out well for you today," Naruto said as he gave her a hug, which she happily returned before he walked over to Linda with his arm out. "I think I should take you back home, Linda, don't know who would be out here wandering around. Besides, your house is near mine anyways," Naruto said as she gladly nodded. "Tell Haley I'll be right back after I walk her home," he said as Francine nodded before he smiled at Linda. "After you," he said as he bowed to her with a smirk. "Gladly," Linda replied as they walked back to her home as she wrapped her arm around his. During the walk she couldn't help but truly enjoy the closeness she was in, with the chill in the air giving the excuse to hug him closer to her body. She couldn't believe of how lucky she was today of feeling truly happy after so long, and they hadn't even done anything yet, so she was excited for when or if they did. "I had a wonderful time Naruto, thank you for everything," she said before she gathered up her courage and softly kissed Naruto on the cheek before blushing and quickly entering her home. On the other side of the door she was squealing like an excited little girl. "So did you have fun with Naruto?" Bob asked as she nodded. I gave him an embrace on the cheek and he held me close to him on the way here," she said excitedly as he chuckled. "Well, that's good for you Linda, you deserve your own happiness. Take it one step at a time and I can see you being with him," Bob said as he smiled at her. "Oh, I will, and I won't waste the opportunity," she said as she went to her room to finish getting ready for bed. "Ah Naruto, I can't wait to see you again," was Linda's last thought before she went into a blissful sleep. Minutes earlier. Naruto smiled as Linda's door closed as he rubbed his cheek, still feeling the embrace Linda gave him. "How well, that was interesting," Naruto muttered out softly before he walked back to the Smiths to get Haley. Once over there he saw her outside of the front door with a small duffel bag, and as she saw Naruto return, she quickly went back inside for a moment and told Francine that he was here and heading out. He gave her a soft embrace before putting her bag in the car and quickly driving back home. It didn't take long after getting inside that Haley dropped her bag and dragged Naruto to the backyard so they could have more fun in the hot tub for the evening before they eventually went to their bed and continued their nightly activities. This was a very interesting day, and Naruto, as well as Haley, had loved every minute of it. Morning/Naruto room. It had been several months since the whole fiasco with Stan going crazy, him hooking up with Linda and Francine for a get-together, and Haley's and his passionate love-making, and things had been slightly crazy since then. Between Stan's con artist and thief of a father coming back into Stan's life and messing with everything, and Stan being reassigned to Saudi Arabia due to him being an idiot, which only ended when he had to go in and save them. He was almost too late, as when he had arrived they were all about to be stoned due to various reasons. He could still remember the conversation he had with Haley when she had found out his CIA connections, since he couldn't really cover up an attack helicopter landing in the stoning arena as a friend's favor. Flashback. Naruto sighed as he gave the pilot the sign to take off as multiple civilians were rushing towards the helicopter. He had even been able to save Roger from being in a rich, old man's HRM before picking up the rest of the Smiths. The sight of seeing Roger in that HRM girl outfit was creepy enough as it was, along with hearing from him how he ended up there. Steve selling Roger to a merchant who then sold him to the rich, old man. Luckily Naruto was able to sneak into the palace to retrieve him and got out in no time. Naruto, what is this? How are you here and how did you find us? Haley asked as she took off her dress to reveal her usual clothes underneath and handed it to her mother, since she was only in her black pair of BR and panties along with knee-high boots. Yeah, this is a standard issue CIA helicopter, Stan said as he looked around the helicopter, making Haley cross her arms and frown at him. Fine, I really wanted to tell you this in private and when things had calmed down, but I can't really hide this, can I? He asked as she shook her head, making him sigh. Guess so, he said as he rubbed the back of his neck. Out with it, Naruto, what is all of this? Haley asked with a glare as he rubbed her shoulders to calm her down. Fine, I had to call in a favor with my boss to come and save you, and I am a CIA freelance agent. I only report into one man, so it isn't like I am like your father at all, he said as she widened her eyes in shock. I knew you were too perfect, pretty boy. Stan yelled while pointing at him accusingly before everyone glared at him, Naruto for being his usual annoying self and the rest of the Smiths for yelling at the boy who had just saved them from Stan's mistake. He could be a mass murderer for all I care. He saved us from what you got us into by not returning when Bullock offered you your job back. Francine yelled as Haley was still thinking everything over, since the man she loved had just told her he was a government agent that her father was from. Haley, please don't be mad, I was going to tell you I was just worried since I know how you feel about the government, but it isn't like I do the same stupid stuff your father does, he said as he ignored Stan's glare. You are lucky I love you or I would be so much angrier, Haley said as she gave him a soft embrace before punching him in the arm and slapping him across the head, which made him chuckle. I deserve that for keeping it a secret from you. I am sorry, Haley, and I love you too, he said as he held her close as she smirked. Just get us home and back into America, you can pay me back for keeping this a secret from me when we get there, she said as he nodded and kissed the top of her head, enjoying her being back in his arms after being away for so long. Flashback end. He had to spend the next week after that going with Haley to some of her rallies to make up for him keeping the full truth from her, which he honestly didn't mind since all he cared for was that she was back in his life again. His love life had also gotten a bit more hectic, but it wasn't like he minded that since it just meant more love for him. At least it felt good to get that off of his chest from what he kept from her. Lisa had taken the role as his first member since moving to Langley Falls very seriously, as she had continued to search for more people who could join. She had even invited Lindsay over to introduce her to everyone, which thankfully went smoothly, and now Lindsay had a room of her own at his house, which he was probably going to have to renovate it to have room for everyone. Janet though started to give off the feeling like she wanted to be more than friends with benefits. She started to stay over a lot more over the few months and even started to give him more signs of affection outside of the bedroom and even spent time with him just talking and making sure he was alright and tended to almost all his needs without him asking her. He didn't mind since he cared for Janet even if she wasn't officially with him since with how her father outright ignored her at school and at home when it was his turn to look after her. Her mother though spent most of her time with her job and only spent an hour or so at dinner at most, so he was more than happy to be there for her when she needed it. Even Lindsay had become an official member after they had gone on several dates, but she wanted to save their first time for a special occasion which he fully understood, but it didn't keep them from playing around with each other as Lindsay loved to be played with in public settings like the mall or movie theaters. Tiffany though had been very busy with college as the new semester had started and she started to focus on her classes. She still gave him a lot of attention as well, and he even went with her on study dates to the library to help her with some of her assignments, which he did the same with Haley when she needed it. Tiffany and Haley were able to spend time together at the college and even hung out in between classes as they had become pretty good friends since they also knew each other from when Haley worked at Tiffany's STRPCLB. It was an actually surprise to some people that Tiffany was at the top of most, if not all, of her classes, even though some of them heard she was STRPR and automatically was labeled dumb and stupid. But she was able to quickly prove them wrong and that she had both gorgeous looks as well as genius smarts. Of course he had kept in near constant contact with Suliuha and Scarlet over the phone, which both were happy for, while making sure to send themselves doing dirty and naughty stuff to Naruto, who also loved it. He had gotten videos almost daily from the both of them as they continued to show him how much they were wanting him. Though one day he did some research on Scarlet since he was curious about how she had been since she had went off on her mission and found out Stan had an unhealthy obsession with her while she had been in the same CIA training class as him. Of course, with Scarlet being solely his, since the tattoos proved it, he decided to devise a plan since Stan liked to snoop into his life so much. Especially after the Smiths learned he is freelance agent with a CIA contract. He made sure to hide Sewell's contact but decided to keep Scarlet's out and watch the fireworks happen next time he decided to snoop into his life, though he figured it wouldn't be for some time. "Naruto, are you okay? You're kind of spacing out there," Linda said as he was pulled out of his thoughts as he remembered that he, Linda and Francine were having their little get-together, but this time they were at his house while his girls were out having girl time together, which he was thankful for. When he first started his group he was a bit worried about girls potentially butting heads, but all he had seen between them was an almost sisterly bond, which he was extremely grateful for since the last thing he wanted was them fighting amongst themselves. Sure, the girls so far had some slight disagreements, but it wasn't towards their relationship with Naruto. "Sorry Linda, spaced out a bit there," he said with a chuckle as he pressed in his piece to a puzzle that they were doing in his living room. "Don't you ever get tired of this routine of ours?" Francine asked as she took a sip of her wine with a frown. "I understand your sadness due to how Stan is a freak with his life, but it's not like we have to do puzzles or anything. We can always play poker or go see a movie," he said as Francine set down her glass of wine. "But it's not even that. When I got married I thought it was going to be exciting, but so far Stan has just set me in a rut and gotten me and my family into crazy and silly situations," she said in frustration as Linda and Naruto frowned at her. "Well, how about we skip next week's meet-up and choose a random day to do something around town," he said as he rubbed his chin. "There is an art auction opening up soon at this place called Boo, and could be interesting." "That sounds interesting," Francine said with a smile before she got a text from Stan asking her to grab some food for today's lasagna since he destroyed the one she made last night. "Ugh, I have to go run some errands," she said with a groan as they had already finished the puzzle. "Well, I can come along since I need some food as well," he said as he turned to Linda with an inviting smile. "Fine, I guess I can come along since I need some groceries as well," Linda said as she played it off nonchalantly but was very happy to spend more time with Naruto. "Great, if you want we can take one of my rides," he said as Francine squealed with a smile. "Sweet." Francine said as she finished up her wine as he grabbed his keys while Linda and Francine followed him into his garage. Wow! This is your car? Linda said in shock as she had never seen his car since whenever they went over to the other's house they walked since they all lived so close to each other. Yup, it's custom made since this Lamborghini model is usually a two-seater but with a bit more money they made it special for me, he said as he unlocked it as Francine got in the front passenger seat before he could open the door for her. He chuckled as he opened the back seat door for Linda as she let out a soft chuckle. "Why thank you," Linda said with a smile as she slid into the back seat before he closed the door and got into the driver's seat. "What kind of job do you have to have so you can afford a car like this?" Linda asked as he pulled out of the garage. "I'm a beta tester for programs and certain items and the companies pay me very well for my input," he said as he sent Francine a wink as she understood his slight aversion to telling others he was a CIA agent. Of course all of his current girls knew since when Haley learned he only felt it fair to tell them as well and thankfully they all accepted it pretty well after he had told them he didn't go around killing people since he was more of a stealth agent. Of course they had cut Naruto off from some of their fun time for a week to at least make up for keeping that secret from them. "Wow, that is really lucky of you to get a job like that," Linda said as they drove off to the grocery store. Red State Grocery Store. "I am just tired of how every day is the same," Francine complained as she leaned against their shared shopping cart as the three of them went down the aisles. "I understand, since it can be very boring doing the same thing over and over again, especially if it is boring to begin with," he said as he set something down in the cart as Francine nodded before she started to move down the aisle more before he noticed Linda having some trouble grabbing something from a higher-up shelf. "Do you need some help reaching that, Linda?" Naruto asked as he saw Linda more or less on her toes trying to reach a can on the top shelf. He couldn't help but let his eyes comb over her great figure, especially her great peach as she struggled to reach the can. "Yes, if you wouldn't mind. It is too far out of my reach. I mean, who puts things this high anyway? Hell, I sometimes see the elderly have a difficult time trying to get some of these high-shelved items," Linda said as she lowered herself back down off of her toes while still looking at the shelf. Naruto chuckled as he walked up to her and saw the item she was reaching for. He smiled as he went up behind her to get better access to the sections she was trying to reach. As he did this he ended up leaning forward too much and pressed his body against Linda's back. Linda knew this must have been an accident but she couldn't help but feel the heat shoot up to her face as she felt the man what she has been spending so much time with and had a large crush on now behind her pressed against her back. He was so toned and strong compared to the more average build her husband had for the few times she has slept against him. The feeling of his body heat engulfed her smaller frame made her feel both safe and yet also extremely aroused at the same time. Her mind couldn't help but go to him taking her and ravishing her from behind right there in the store. She could picture him pinning her to the shelf, ripping down her pants and claiming her right there in front of everyone, while she would for him like a dirty ware. Linda knew this would not happen but still the thought of her crush making passionate love to her right there caused a shiver to shoot through her body. Acting almost solely on impulse she started to press back against Naruto. Feeling her peach press against his waist as he was leaning over her. Naruto, not missing the fact he was leaning against Linda, tried to find the item as quickly as possible so his friend would not feel uncomfortable that his carelessness put them into. He knew he was very close of being right against her peach and he really didn't want to put her in a spot where she felt like he was taking advantage of the situation they found themselves in. But those thoughts much like his search for the item stopped when he felt Linda close the slight distance between their two bodies and pressed her peach against him. He knew she meant to do it due to the fact there was no reason for her to press back against him so much. Mostly since if she wanted she could have moved to the side to get from under him but instead she went further into his embrace. Naruto knew that Linda must have a not-so-normal marriage just from his time around her over the months going all the way back from their first meeting. She seemed more like a single woman than a married one and Bob didn't treat her like one with their wife, he seemed more to act like a very good friend to her. He also seemed to go out of his way so the two of them could spend time together. That wasn't something a husband did since most didn't want for his wife to be spending time with another man so often. But all that didn't matter at the moment because it was clear that Linda was pressing against him to feel him on her, and if that was what she wanted he would far from interject with her wishes. Linda thought she might have done more harm than good to her relationship with Naruto due to her body acting on her own. I mean, what would he want with some old lady like me pressing against him like this? He must be grossed out, that is why he hasn't moved yet, was all Linda could think as she was still pressed against him. She was just about to move when something she didn't expect to happen did. Naruto started to press back against her body and place one of his hands on her waist. She could feel him thrusting his pelvis against hers. And even if they were not real thrusts, they felt so much better than the few forced ones she experienced during the rare times she had slept with her husband. She could feel the heat from his body against her rear as he kept rhythmically pumping against her. The only thing she could do was return the favor and push back against him, grinding her peach against the thrusting midsection of the man behind her. Naruto felt Linda grinding against him as he pumped onto her lush peach. It was so much plumper and full than the other girls in his newly formed family, with only Tiffany above her, and he couldn't help but enjoy the feeling of her backing it up against him. He knew he was starting to get more and more aroused as this went on. He wanted to show Linda just what she was doing to him right here in public. Linda couldn't believe what was going on in public in the store she shopped in all the time right now, grinding against a man that wasn't her husband. But the thing that really was starting to cause her head to float was feeling that something strong was growing against her peach. She knew what it had to be, and she couldn't believe she was having this effect on her crush. This was the most shocking thing until she felt Naruto start to push her with his pelvis strong till she was pressed against the self. She was about to ask him what was going on till she felt him put his arms over her and grip the shelves above her. She then, to her amazement and arousal, felt him start to grind against her peach with a lot more vigor. Linda could only bite her bottom lip to keep back her moans and grunts as she felt Naruto dry hump her with force. Every time he put some real energy into it, she would bump and shake the self she found herself pressed on. Her mind was going blank. She knew if she didn't have her pants on right now she would be getting harder and better than she had ever had before if the quality of the move she was feeling right now were anything to go by. She felt his irking through his pants and between her peach cheeks as he kept grinding up against her, and was shocked by how large it was. "Tell me, Linda, did I get the thing you wanted yet?" Naruto asked her as he placed his hands over her while leaned over, whispering in her ear. He could hear her breathing heavily as he pumped a little harder against her plump, cougar peach. Almost. "You are close, so close. Oh God, you are so close." Linda could barely breathe out to the young man, as she knew if it wasn't for the layers of clothing they both were wearing she would be from behind right there against the canned vegetables. She never wished she was naked in public more than now. Linda felt Naruto breathing in her ear as he picked up the pace. She felt him move with so much force she was slowly lifted off the ground with it. She was planted against the shelf as her peach was almost ravished through her tight pants and her new underwear she wore in hope to impress her two crushes. She felt Naruto move his lips inches from her ear and then, to her pleasure, start to nibble on her hair. She felt his tongue slide her inner ear as he ate and nibbled on the rim. "And Naruto, I'm close. You are so close," Linda said, knowing full well she wasn't talking about her the can anymore. She was talking about being close to climaxing in the middle of a supermarket with only the grace of every god there is that they have been alone this whole time. She wanted him to claim her and make a real woman out of her so bad she didn't know what to think. She never wanted anything as bad as she wanted Naruto to be the real first man to be with her right then and there. But right before she could find her CLMX and release all over herself, Naruto pulled back and stopped, leaving Linda panting against the shelf, holding on to keep herself upright as she looked back to Naruto with pleading and slightly angry eyes. She continued to look until she saw what he was holding with a smirk. He was holding the can of corn she was trying to reach. She knew he stopped for a reason, but she didn't know why. All she knew was now her panties were dripping wet and she had a lot to think about her blonde friend and crush. "Here you go, Linda, he whispered as he leaned close to her before she pouted until she felt his hand trail down her back until his hand got to her peach and she had to hold in another as she felt him give it a gentle but powerful squeeze. We shouldn't keep Francine waiting. Linda frowned as she walked off with a slight limp in her step as she had to be careful about the way she walked or she might start dripping through her pants. So Fran, did you throw out the lasagna? Linda asked as she remembered Francine's reason for coming by the store on the ride over while her mind was stuck on the intense action she had shared with Naruto. No, I just have to find a way to make it taste fresh on Thursday. But tonight is leftover Wednesday, so I have to make a casserole that tastes like I made it yesterday, Fran said with a sigh before continuing. If I stay in this rut, it won't be long until it's head in the oven Friday. Well, that seems complicated. I don't understand why Stan can't be fine to change things up every once in a while since things don't have to go as planned all the time, Naruto said as he remembered a similar conversation with Haley when she ate at his place a while back while he smirked at Linda who immediately blushed and looked away. Hey, I need to go use the restroom, do you mind? He asked with a smile before they smiled and nodded before he left for the bathroom. Linda, look. It's the Ladybugs. Francine said in excitement as Linda looked in Francine's point of view. Coming from the entrance of the store, 3 women were walking down the main aisle in a slow-motion walk that made Linda seem unimpressed while to Fran it was the exact opposite. The woman on Francine's left was clearly of Asian descent with long black hair that reached the middle of her back. She wore an all-purple attire of an ascot, a blouse that had a deep U dip that showed off a lot of cleavage of her high C low D cup melons. She also wore a miniskirt that squeezed her peach nicely and high-heeled shoes while carrying a gray handbag. The one on her right was curly red-haired woman that wore an attire that was mostly blue with a pair of jeans, stylish heeled shoes, and a jacket over a mint green shirt that was lowered to show off a nice amount of cleavage of her high C cup melons with a green purse. The last woman in the center was a short-haired brunette who wore a yellow shirt that had a nice V cut to show off the cleavage of her almost DD cup BRST with a long green-legged skirt that made her peach look firm with red shoes. The thing that had all 3 have in common was the matching ladybug brooch they were wearing on their left melons. Wow! For housewives, those ladybugs really have it all. A fast-lane life and a slow-motion walk, Francine said in a happy daze when looking upon said group. Linda rolled her eyes in disgust in that response. Ugh, they're snobs, Francine. A girl would have to be pretty desperate to associate with Dash, she said before Francine cut her off. Christy, Francine said as she ran over to the ladybugs. Linda was trying to reach for her but she got away which had Linda narrow her eyes at Francine's retreating form. Remember me? Francine. Oh, how I wish I could peel off your skin, put it on, and be you. I mean, hi, Francine said in embarrassment making a fool of herself. She was like this quite a lot whenever she tried to talk to the ladybugs. Oh, Francine. No time to think of an excuse to not chat with you. The Ladybugs and I are buying crudité for a charity art auction tonight at Boo, Christy said in a smug tone. Oh, I'm actually planning on going there next week with a friend of mine. I'll probably see you then, Francine said as the 3 decided to slowly walk away ignoring her like usual. Hey you two, what did I miss? Naruto said as he came back. Well, just ran into the Ladybugs and briefly chatted with them to learn they plan to go to the art auction at Boo tonight. Oh Naruto, can we actually go there tonight then next week please? Francine asked as Naruto smirked at her and chuckled at the pleading look on Francine's face. Sure, I don't see why not, but Linda, will you be able to come with us or no? He asked as she snapped her out of her daze. No, I won't be able to go since Bob's parents are coming over soon and I have to get things ready with Bob, Linda said with a frown as she wished she could have gone with. Sorry on that Linda, maybe I can make it up to you in some way or another, he said as he gave Linda a smirk and a wink as she started to blush dark red again. I'll think about it. Thanks for the offer though, Linda said as she rubbed her thighs together. As they walked out of the store after getting their groceries purchased, the 3 heard barking a bit of a distance away with seeing a large group of people cluttered near the sound. Once checking on what it is, they saw a small dog with a blue bow on its head with its leash connected to a woman who was smashed against the grocery carts dead. Nothing to see here, just a woman crushed to death by a runaway train of shopping carts. Huh. Or is that something to see? One of the police officers said thoughtfully. What should we do about the dog? Turn it over to her next of kin, the other officer said to his partner. Seems like a lot of paperwork to me, the first officer said as both of them drew out their guns to shoot the defenseless animal before Francine quickly went to protect it. No. Stop. I'll take that dead woman's dog, Francine as she got back up with said dog in her arms. Finally, I have someone to play frisbee with, she continued to say as she pulled out a frisbee out of her purse and threw it causing the dog to chase after it before the frisbee came back and Francine caught it in her teeth. Good dog, she said as she turned and smiled at Naruto after pulling the frisbee from her mouth. Is it okay for me bring him in your car? She asked as he nodded. As long as the dog doesn't pee in my car I am fine with taking it with us, Naruto said with chuckle at Francine's odd trick of sorts. Once driving Francine and Linda to their respective homes with their respective groceries, Naruto went back to his place to put away his groceries. He soon got a text from Haley on a something that came up while he was at the store with her mom as it seemed that Steve and Klaus had read through her diary and found some really embarrassing stuff about her, fun times though she didn't mention him by name in her diary. They weren't able to find out that she had been with Naruto but she still ended up locking up the two into her closet with no way out. Naruto chuckled on that thought and wondered what the two would be doing until she let them go. Probably have an odd moment from the Castaway film or something of the sort. The next few hours went by as a blur with him getting ready for the art auction tonight and he wanted to look good at a professional setting since Francine wanted to have fun with the new activity to get her out of her rut. He killed some more time by watching the news and saw Greg and Terry do a TV segment at the news station dealing with house pets. He ended up seeing Stan with the dog Francine took home from the grocery store and he wondered how Stan got on that segment in the first place. Apparently Stan didn't want the dog at the house so wanted to find it a new home without killing it from what he heard from Francine via text messaging. Naruto didn't know if he should laugh or be very concerned when Fussy attacked and bit Greg's crotch while Terry had to pull him away. Once it reached time for him to pick up Francine he quickly got into his car and drove to her house and as he parked in the driveway he saw Francine exiting her front door and couldn't help but think she looked absolutely gorgeous. She wore a red dress that was tight on her figure with a nice dip in it to show off her massive E-cup melons. She also had a jade necklace around her neck with red-heeled shoes that had wraps around her ankles that made her legs look perfect and her rear nicely accented. From what Naruto can see on her face that she had magenta eyeshadow with pink lip gloss that made her eyes pop and her lips look very kissable. He smiled at her as he got out of the car and opened up her door. Why thank you Naruto, you look very handsome today, she said with a smile as he gently closed the door and smiled down at her. You are welcome and I have to say you look very appealing yourself, he said as he went over to his door, missing the blush on Francine's cheeks as he got back into the car before they drove for about half an hour to get to Boo. As he pulled up, the valet opened both of the car doors and gave Naruto his valet parking ticket before he drove away with his car to park it. The gallery so far was great to see with a lot of the art that were displayed. Some were amateur works while the rest were from up-and-coming artists with good publicity. Naruto grabbed a glass of wine for himself and for Francine as they walked by one of the waiters. This feels so amazing to get out of the house and out of my rut, she said as he smiled and took a sip of his wine. Well I am glad you are enjoying yourself, he said as she linked his arm in his with a smile until Francine frowned as she looked at a group of 3 women in similar black dresses. It's the Ladybugs, Francine said nervously before she started to walk towards them with Naruto and was about to call their names until she accidentally knocked over Naruto's drink and it spilled onto his pants. Oh my god I am so sorry, she said upset as she grabbed his arm gently and dragged Naruto to the nearest restroom not seeing the specific restroom sign on the door. Relax Francine, I am wearing black pants so you can barely see it, he said as she grabbed some paper towels from the dispenser and started to scrub against his pants not paying attention to what he just said. Naruto frowned nervously as Francine crouched in front of him, scrubbing against his crotch as he had a direct line of sight down her dress to see the cleavage of her large melons. Francine frowned as she felt so embarrassed for spilling his wine on him until she felt something strong against her hand and blushed darkly as she realized where she was scrubbing and started to remember her memories of being a teenager and seeing Naruto's foot-long member being deep-throated by her daughter. She tried to get the thought out of her head before she threw all rational thought out of the proverbial window and pulled down his pants and boxers and gasped as his semi-strong member hit against her face. Francine, what are you doing?" he asked in shock before she slowly licked up his member, making him shudder as it grew fully strong and rested against her face as she smiled up at him with lust in her eyes. "I am tired of watching my daughter get F by you and enjoying herself as she ate on this massive thing. I need this or I will go crazy," she whispered out as she kissed up his, leaving pink embrace marks along the 12 inches of it. Naruto blushed a bit as he realized that Francine had watched all of his and Haley's times from when they were at her house. He was about to try and talk some sense into her before all that came out of his mouth was a groan as she swallowed half of his member in her warm mouth and started jerking off the rest of it. Francine, think about this," he moaned out as she bobbed her head back and forth as she continued to move her hand up and down his while she used her other hand to squeeze and massage his sack. "Oh, I have been for months now and I need this more than you know," Francine whispered in a sultry tone after she pulled back her head and let his pee-pee pop out of her mouth before she gave the tip an embrace with her supple lips. She smiled and before Naruto could say anything Francine swallowed all 12 inches of his pee-pee down her throat and nearly came from it invading her throat as she squeezed her melons and slid her hand under her dress. Naruto was shocked at how vigorously Francine ate on his pee-pee as she seemed to be able to take all of it without it choking her or making her GG as she repeatedly shoved him straight down her throat. He even had to lean against the sink for support since Francine was putting all of her weight on his pelvis with all of her attention on his pee-pee. "God damn Francine, your mouth. It feels so good but so wrong," he moaned out as she shoved him back down her throat and wrapped her tongue around the as she bobbed her head back and forth. Francine let out a mm that vibrated against his pee-pee as it continuously slid down her throat. She had learned how to repress her GG reflex, but this was her first time actually needing to use it as this was the biggest pee-pee she had ever seen or ate on. "Naruto, please leak, I want it so badly," she moaned out as she kissed his and pulled her hand from under her dress. In her lust-filled state showed him her wet fingers that were dripping in her sticky juices. Naruto bit his lip as she licked around his tip before he had enough of it. Francine let out a surprised as he grabbed her head and shoved his member into her mouth and down her throat as she looked up at him. "If you want my pee-pee and leak so badly then you can have it," he said as he started thrusting in and out of her mouth as her eyes rolled back as pleasure jolted through her body. She felt his pee-pee slide down her throat with such force that made her think that this was how it felt for Haley when she took on this horse of a pee-pee all to herself. Just thinking about horses got her on the edge as it got her turned on even more. "Francine, your mouth is so perfect," he moaned out as he moved more into her before he felt her throat tighten around his pee-pee while she continued to wrap her tongue around it. "God, please leak. Fill my stomach up with your seed, you stallion," she thought as her eyes rolled back more before they lit up as she felt his pee-pee starting to throb in her mouth. "You wanted this so much, then be sure to eat all of it," he groaned out as he shoved it straight down her throat one last time before he came straight down her throat. Francine orgasmed instantly as she felt the hot delicious juices shoot down her throat and fill up her mouth as she repeatedly had to eat to keep it from spilling out her mouth, though as much as she tried to keep up some started to leak out and spill onto her dress and her melons, but not much with how she tried to keep up. Even the smell and taste of his juices was too much for her as she came again from the sensation as she felt the intense pleasure shoot through her. After nearly 2 minutes of leaking, he pulled out of her throat with a loud pop as she stuck out her tongue with a breathe as she stared up at him with her glazed over eyes and AF stupid smile. After exiting her orgasm daze, she looked down at herself and she saw some dribbles of Naruto's juices on her. She smiled as she wiped them up with her fingers and brought them to her mouth before she ate on them, making sure to savor each drop. This continued until each part of her dress was clean from Naruto's juices, and Naruto saw each and every part of it, making him start to get strong again. He had to calm himself back down, or else he would have to take Francine right there in the restroom. Before Francine could notice his member again, he quickly pulled back up his pants and sighed as he crouched down to Francine. Francine. Earth to Francine, Naruto said as he kept trying to shake her out of her euphoric state. Francine muttered out as he helped her up to her feet before she grew dark red as she remembered what had actually happened. Oh my god. What did I just do? Francine said in shock as Naruto rubbed her shoulders and sighed. Relax, we can talk about it later, but right now let's just get back to your house so we aren't overheard, he said as she nodded before they exited the restroom. Francine, the two jumped when they heard the voice before they turned and noticed that the ladybugs were literally right outside of the women's restroom with a very smug look on their faces. It seems you have more in common with us than we thought, Christy said, getting Francine to feel very nervous on that statement. I do. Francine asked nervously as Naruto frowned at the three women and got the strangest feeling he had met the three of them before. The real reason we ladybugs get together is to compare notes on our affairs, Christy said before Casey smirked and started counting on her fingers. I'm sleeping with my tennis pro, my gardener, and I'm letting the neighbor boy watch when I go to the bathroom, Casey said as she licked her lips on the nostalgic memories. And you're clearly doing this, handsome fellow, Katie said as she smiled at the two of them. Oh, and no. Francine tried to explain themselves on what they did, but Christy frowned at them. You are having an affair, aren't you, sweetie? Christy asked as she pulled out a spare ladybug brooch from her purse. Francine looked down onto it, and just the gleam and sparkle of the accessory. Its temptation to belong with the popular group was drawing her in, and thoughts of potential times of her doing it with Naruto were filling her mind and proved too strong for her. Yes. I am cheating on my husband. Francine said as Naruto blushed and watched as the three women smiled at Francine. Welcome to the Ladybugs, Francine. Have a nice night with your boy toy, Christy said as she pinned the brooch onto Francine's dress before the three women walked off in slow motion around the corner. Francine, what was that all about? We aren't having an affair, this was an isolated incident, he whispered to her as she frowned and shook her head. I know, but I don't care, Naruto, she said as she grabbed his arm and looked up at him. Please, can we just talk about this? She asked as he sighed, caving under her pleading gaze. Fine, but this is going to be a long night, so we should go to my house since it'll be empty and no one will interrupt, he said as she led her outside and got his car back from the valet. While he drove, he grew nervous as he kept glancing at Francine, who was also stealing glances at him in the same way. It was even worse that both of them were very quiet in the ride to his house. Why don't I turn on some music, he said nervously as he turned on the radio, but found that even the music playing through his speakers didn't kill the silence between them until they reached his house. Here, I'll make some coffee. Do you want to use the shower since you are still kind of, sticky, he asked as he pointed to her dress that still had some white stains on it as well as on her cleavage. I'll get your dress washed and cleaned up for you while you're in the shower, he said as she nodded nervously. Thanks, Naruto, we can talk once I'm done, okay? She asked as Naruto nodded before he guided her to the nearest bathroom with a shower and let her do her business. It didn't take long for the shower or the dress to get cleaned as he figured she was nervous yet excited to talk about what had happened. So, can we talk about what happened earlier? Naruto asked as he set down the cups of coffee while Francine nodded with her head down. I am so sorry for forcing myself on you, but I've had enough, she yelled as tears built up in the corner of her eyes. I am so jealous of watching my daughter be so happy with you and seeing the both of you have such passionate love that not even I have had in my entire marriage. Naruto frowned as he rubbed her shoulder before she hugged him tightly. Naruto, you are so sweet and nice to me, and I keep realizing I don't have to settle for Stan's uncaring attitude and standoffish ways anymore. I want to be with you even if I am cheating on my husband and hurting my daughter. Francine cried out into his chest as he rubbed her back. Francine. Naruto muttered as she kept on crying and speaking in an illegible tone due to her crying for a while with him hugging her close in hopes of keeping her calm. Francine, I need to tell you something that I hope calms you down a bit, he said as he pet her head as she sniffled and looked up at him. He figured if he told her about his situation it might lessen her worry about hurting Haley since he figured that was what made her feel the worst. After a few minutes of explaining it all, Francine nodded and wiped her tears. So that is why you brought that girl to the block party and why you playfully flirt with Linda and me, she asked in between sniffles as he nodded. Yes, and I am sure Haley will understand since we really didn't keep our actions hidden too well, he said as she scooted closer to him again. See, can I maybe join, she asked with a dark blush on her face before she looked him in the eyes. What about Stan? Are you sure this isn't a crisis of some sort, he asked as she shook her head. I don't care. He is so rude to me. I need this, she said as she grabbed his shirt. This isn't some crisis. I need this feeling I get when I see you smile at me, the warmth that flows through me whenever you smirk at me. This powerful love that I have tried to deny for months but can't any longer, she yelled out as tears started to run down her cheeks again before she pulled him to her before their lips crashed together and she kissed him with a passion that she had never had felt before, not even for Stan. Naruto, slowly getting out of his shock, started to wrap his arms around her as he pulled her down with him lying on the couch with her lying on his chest. Francine, I do care for you a lot and I would love to have you with me, but before we go too far we need to talk to Haley. I just don't want her to feel betrayed and freak out on seeing us together without her knowing, he said as she nodded. I know, but for now let me enjoy this feeling of being complete, she whispered out as he kissed her again, deciding the couch would be fine for them to sleep on since neither of them felt like moving and ruining the moment. I love you, Naruto, she whispered out, not caring for an answer as they both started to drift off to sleep. Naruto smiled as he kissed her forehead once she passed out and combed a strand of hair behind her ear. I love you too, Francine, he said as he laid back with a soft smile, hoping that everything would work out in the morning. Next morning. Naruto blushed a bit as he woke up and saw Francine laying on top of him as he remembered the events of last night with a smile. Francine, wake up, he whispered to her as she frowned and buried her face in his chest. No, it's too perfect here. I don't want it to be a dream, she groaned out as he tilted her head up and kissed her softly, which she more than happily returned. It isn't a dream, but we need to get up since we still need to explain to Haley and figure out this ladybug business, he said as she opened her eyes with a pout. Will she understand? Because I don't want to leave this feeling, Francine said worriedly as he pet her head to calm her down. She will if we explain it the same as you explained to me, but right now let's first get off the couch. For as much as I love the feeling of you pressed up against me, we can't stay like this all day, he teased as she blushed a bit and nodded. As they got up from the couch they let out a small groan as they were both feeling a bit stiff from sleeping on a couch all night, as even if his couch was comfy the lack of size kept them stuck in one spot. I'll drive you home, but don't tell Haley anything until I call and tell her that we need to talk, he said as she nodded and followed him to the car after having a quick cup of coffee to wake themselves up. Due to Naruto's quick driving, Francine had gotten back home before the rest of her family woke up. After giving Naruto a quick loving embrace, she quickly went inside and went to her bedroom and quickly changed out of her dress, keeping it in a safe spot for the memory's sake before going into the connecting bathroom to fake taking her morning shower to hide the fact she had just came home. As the next day went by, Francine had to take care of several things that were going on as of late. The Ladybugs had contacted her in wanting to know all of her juicy details of her affair with her boy toy, and to come by to an expensive restaurant for lunch, which will be their treat since it's Francine's first time in their group. Of course, in return they wanted Francine to bring over physical proof of their relationship, so she decided to bring in some personal stuff that she had gotten from Naruto that she had scrounged up. She was also incredibly nervous around Haley since she had essentially threw herself at her boyfriend. She knew Naruto needed to call her later to find the right time to drop the bomb onto her daughter, but right now he was probably busy with something else. As the day went on, she also noticed Stan and Fussy had been spending a lot of time together, with Stan feeling attached to Fussy and taking him practically everywhere, even at work. Francine grew nervous as lunch rolled along as she sat in between Katie and Casey as Christy smiled at her. "So Francine darling, what have you brought to show us all?" she asked as Francine grew more nervous. She hadn't been able to get much to show them, but she had a pair of his boxers as he gave them to her to keep the ladybugs calm while he looked into them since he had felt something odd about them. "These are the boxers he wore when we first slept together," she said as they smiled and seemed to accept it before they started to go on about how the SEC with the various men the three slept with went and it wasn't great at all. She wasn't too sure if she was actually okay talking about this kind of topic with girls or if she was actually comfortable with discussing it or even enjoy it. But she quickly found it wasn't great at all. She didn't know why she even wanted to join in the first place now. Her day with the ladybugs went on before they decided to bring Francine to a boutique store they regularly went to where they would pay for the first ladybug dress for her. After trying on several outfits they had given her to try on, she ended up finding one that fit her just right. It was a dark pink dress that had some lighter pink frills around her bust and the end of the dress. The dress itself was strapless and low-cut as it showed off a lot of her cleavage. She even wore knee-length white-heeled boots that made her feel very appealing. "I love it," Francine said as she kept posing in front of the mirror. "Francine," someone said from behind her and turned around to see Linda. "Linda. What are you doing here?" Francine asked as she grew a bit nervous. "I actually shop here regularly but I felt like getting something special," Linda said as she hid the bag behind her as hid the dress she had gotten to show off for Naruto later when she eventually called in the favor she had for him not being able to take her along to the art auction. "But I'm wondering what are you doing here? We were supposed to hang out earlier today and continue working on that puzzle together. I even decided to go and shop for some new ones," Linda said as she looked at Francine with a bit of a frown as she noticed the look on the other women's faces. "Oh yeah, I forgot about that," Francine muttered as she remembered their personal get-together day was tomorrow since they rescheduled due to the auction. "Puzzles? What are you, a baby?" Christy said, getting a hurtful look from Linda. "A baby whose nanny dresses her like CRP," Casey said, getting the three ladybugs to mockingly laugh at her. "Francine?" Linda asked, surprise with a frown as Francine looked down in shame. "Oh, okay, I get it. Fine, I guess me and Naruto will just have to complete it by ourselves," Linda said as she frowned and walked away. "Wait. Linda!" Francine yelled out as she wanted to tell Linda that she was sorry but the ladybugs had intercepted her. "Forget her. Now you need an outfit, honey, because we're going clubbing with our boy toys tonight. So you better bring your handsome blonde," Christy said with a smirk as Francine nervously rubbed her arm and nodded. "Right, Naruto," Francine said as she looked down at her phone as it buzzed from a text telling her to come by when she had the time. Naruto's home. Naruto frowned as he looked into the ladybugs as the death at grocery store had made him a bit curious. His investigation was interrupted as he heard the doorbell ring a bit of a quick pace before went down to open it. When he opened the door he saw Linda in tears before she ran into him and hugged him. "Linda, what's wrong?" he asked as he pet her head a bit confused as she pulled away slightly. "See, can I come inside please?" she asked with her voice a bit hoarse since he guessed she must have been crying strong for a while. "Sure Linda, come on in. Let me get you something to drink. Your throat must be sore," Naruto said as he led her inside and onto his couch. Once settling down and getting her a glass of water he waited for her to finish up her drink before asking her what was going on. "What has you so shaken up Linda?" he asked as she frowned and explained how she met Francine and the ladybugs at the boutique and how they had treated her as well as how Francine didn't even stick up for her. "Oh Linda, I am so sorry but I can promise you this will blow over soon since I am sure that Francine is better than that," he said as he wiped the tears off her cheek with a smile. "Are you sure? Those women made me feel so worthless," she muttered as she looked down before Naruto brought her head back up so that she could look into his eyes. "Well, they are just snotty women that won't be around Francine around much longer," he said as he smiled at her warmly. Plus you are far from worthless, you are a appealing woman that deserves so much, to me you are priceless, he said as she blushed and smiled. Linda was happy that she had come to Naruto to cheer herself up as he always made her feel like she was so important and loved. Screw it, I want this too much, she thought as she leaned towards him and pressed her lips against his in a passionate embrace. Taking him surprise, she pushed him down onto the couch and let loose all of her desires upon the man she felt so many emotions towards. She grabbed onto his head to keep him in place as she deepened the embrace and snaked her tongue into his mouth. Naruto's surprise wore off as Linda's tongue entered his mouth and he realized what was going on before he remembered the defeated look in Linda's eyes when she was at his door. He decided to not push her away as he knew it must have taken courage as he wrapped his arms around her to bring her closer to him before drifting one of his hands to her head and the other on her lower back while their tongues were swapping saliva in their passion. He smiled as he guided his hand lower until it went to the same peach that had grinded against him in the grocery store and started to rub it as she moaned softly in response. He smirked as he started to squeeze it softly as her moans started to increase. Naruto more, please, Linda moaned out as he used both his hands to squeeze her peach as he kissed her deeply making her into their embrace. They continued to make out until suddenly Naruto doorbell rang making both them groan at the sudden interruption before he gave Linda one more quick embrace before he got up from the couch and went towards the door and opened it to reveal a worried-looking Francine in a dress that made her look very cecy. Naruto, you have to help me, the ladybugs, they're after me, Francine said worriedly as he frowned and let her in. Here, tell me what happened, he said as Francine nodded and walked in before getting confused as she saw Linda sitting on his couch with a soft blush on her cheeks before Linda noticed she was there. Francine? What are you doing here? Linda asked, a bit upset that her friend unintentionally stopped her make-out session with her crush. I'm here because the ladybugs are out to kill me if they don't get dirt on me to keep me quiet about their affairs on their husbands, Francine said as Linda frowned. Dirt? What do you mean, Francine? Linda asked suspiciously as Francine frowned. It means I need to sleep with a man before this day is out or I'm good as dead. Francine said urgently as Naruto frowned and sat her down on the couch next to Linda before he sat on the table that was in front of his couch. Okay, I need you to tell me everything that happened at your dinner thing since between this and the fact that I haven't been able to talk to Haley all day since she's busy all day with a term paper. I am a little stressed out, he said as Francine understood his hint before she nodded and told him everything. He was proud of Francine for breaking things off with the ladybugs since they only cheated for the sake of cheating. He was glad that Francine wasn't like that as he knew she was loyal to the man she loved, who was now him, and only decided to cheat on Stan due to his neglectful and borderline abusive behavior. For him, the only reason he would sleep with someone he knew was married would be because either their husband was abusive, neglectful, someone who forced their wife into the marriage, or if they had some agreement between each other to let them sleep around due to some valid reason. I knew those women seemed too perfect, Linda said with a frown as the fact they were cheating on their loyal husbands was terrible in her mind. She didn't feel bad about making out with Naruto because of her and Bob's situation. Please, you have to help me, Naruto, Francine asked as she grabbed his hand and held it, scared and worried for her and possibly his safety. Relax, Francine, of course I will help you, but I need you to calm down, he said as she nodded as he squeezed her hand with his. I know, and I'm so sorry for the way I acted, Linda. I tried to apologize but they just Francine said before Linda hugged her. I forgive you, Naruto already helped calm me down and help me realize that you aren't like those snotty women, Linda said as Francine smiled and hugged her friend back. If you need my help I am only a call away, she said as she got up. You're leaving, Linda? Naruto asked as she nodded with a small smile. Yeah, since I figure this is a personal thing with you and Francine as well as the fact Bob is probably wondering where I am, she said as he walked her to the door. Thanks, and we will talk later about the embrace later, he said in a low tone as she smiled at him. You can be sure on that, Linda said as she gave him another soft embrace before she left the house, making sure to sway her hips as he watched her leave. Naruto couldn't help but groan a bit as he could feel the headache already coming from explaining things to Linda and Haley as well as the others about Francine joining and Linda possibly joining their group. He knew the day when he got around to telling them was going to be extremely hectic with Haley given how she was very defensive around girls that flirted with him and protected him from them as well as how she would most likely freak out once she knew he had been with her mom when she was supposed to be with her father in a happy marriage. Okay, so Francine, take a deep breath and relax, he told her as she nodded and took several deep breaths that helped her relax as he rubbed her shoulders. Now tell me what they said about Anne Fleming, he said as she nodded and recalled the event as he frowned before she told him of how they ended up dropping Anne Fleming's name as a warning to her if she tried to back out of the group. This is what I was worried about, he said as he quickly went up to his office to grab a newspaper article that he had been looking into. I had a bit of a hunch about the death of the lady at the grocery store a few days ago and looked her up since something felt really off about it. It seems the Ladybugs are somewhat involved, he said as he pointed to her shirt and Francine let out a gasp as she saw a ladybug pin on her. Oh my god. They killed Anne for knowing too much. And they are going to do the same to me. Francine said scared as he rubbed her back to calm her down. I think so since like you said they are willing to do everything and anything to keep their cheating habits a secret or else their lives would be ruined. Everything they thrive on would be lost if their successful husbands divorced them, he said with a frown. But don't worry, I can keep you safe and get this settled without anyone getting hurt. Why you promise? Francine asked as he nodded with a smile. Francine, I am a CIA agent if you forgot, trained by the best mind you, I can handle some cheating housewives, he said as he rubbed his chin while he could finally remember where he knew the three women from before. It had to be shortly after he and Scarlett went on their break to a few months before moving to Langley Falls and was traveling around the world doing various missions. He remembered sleeping with the three of them on separate occasions with Christy in France, Casey in Germany and Katie in Japan. Of course he didn't know any of them were married at the time and he had run into them at various bars for Casey and Christy while he had met Katie at the beach. When he had met and hooked up with them he wasn't looking for a relationship at all with him being on a break with Scarlett, only needed to relieve some stress but once he moved to Langley Falls it just seemed to work with him in a relationship and knew that Scarlett wouldn't mind given she knew about his situation from day one. It just took him a while to remember the three from the mixture of how long he has seen them, his missions preoccupying all of his time and that the times being with them were very brief. Now that he could somewhat relax he easily remembered them though he figured the three wouldn't remember him at all due to the countless people they probably slept with. Naruto, are you okay? Francine asked as she snapped him from his thoughts before he chuckled and nodded. Yeah, just remembered something that could help you defend against the Ladybugs but I will need you to be brave for it, he said as she nodded before he told her his brief past with each of them and his idea for getting them to leave her alone for good. Next day, evening. Francine nervously stood in the parking lot of the Red State grocery store as she had called the Ladybugs to meet them there to exchange dirt. On the walkover had been in a nervous wreck passing by various women and noticed that they were wearing the Ladybug brooch over their melons. She didn't realize before of how serious this was and of how many people were actually involved. Only Naruto's voice was able to keep her calm as much as possible despite her shaking like a leaf. Are you sure this will work, Naruto? How will you get the three to actually show up? Francine asked as her earpiece turned back on. Those three women are all about gossip, Naruto replied from the earpiece in her ear. Calling them and telling them you are ready to exchange your dirt will be more than enough to get them to meet with you and when they show up you just have to tell them what we rehearsed, he said as she nervously nodded as she saw their car pull up. If you're still nervous or forgetting anything just remember I will still be here to help, he said as she nodded again before the Ladybugs exited their car. So Francine, you finally cheated on your husband? I hope you took enough pictures to prove it and satisfy us, Christy said as Francine frowned. I haven't cheated on my husband but I have got dirt on you three to leave me alone, Francine said as she gathered her courage and pulled a file from her purse before she tossed it towards them. What is this? Casey asked as she picked up the file from the ground. Once opening it they grew pale as it was full of photos of them and their affairs in plain view. I have a friend who can easily find things out, so I merely asked for a favor and he was more than willing to help me. If you don't leave me, my house and my family alone, I will have these scattered all down the streets of Langley Falls and in every store," Francine said threateningly as the three ladybugs glared at her. "She's bluffing, she wouldn't actually do that," Katie said as Francine frowned. "I think you're right. Girls, seize her," Christy said as she snapped her fingers. Francine was confused for a moment there until she felt some people come from behind and grab her and dragged her to the area of the parking lot where the shopping carts were located. She soon found her wrists and ankles tied to the metallic poles and she couldn't budge at all. "Last chance, Francine. Join us or die just like N," Christy said as Francine struggled. "Naruto, help," she whispered as she struggled to break free. "Francine, I'm on my way, just hang on," he said over the earpiece as she heard the earpiece cut off as she figured he was rushing towards her. "Well, it seems she wants to die. Rack 'em up," Christy said as she ordered one of the ladybugs to get the shopping carts together and lined them up towards Francine's position. She struggled more as even if she knew Naruto was coming she didn't want to die. She still had so much to do and hoped that Naruto or anyone would come and save her. "Stop." Francine opened her eyes and saw Linda holding the shopping carts just inches from Francine. "Linda," Francine said, glad to see her friend in front of her. "Excuse me, this is an invitation-only function," Katie said as they glared at Linda. "All I ask is that you let me say goodbye to Francine," Linda said as she turned towards Francine and walked over to her with a determined look in her eyes. Francine was confused at what Linda was going to do until she pulled her face towards her and gave her a deep embrace that quickly shocked since she hasn't kissed a girl for a long time, except for her daughter when she was in her teenager mindset a while back, but it was completely different from that due to the passion Linda was giving her. Francine felt Linda's tongue massage against hers while the intensity of the embrace was a lot to take it. Her limbs went limp while she wanted to hold Linda close to her, but the bindings were holding her in place. From Linda's perspective, she enjoyed it, despite the circumstances. She smiled as her hands left Francine's face and went towards the back of her head to keep the embrace going, the other hand being placed on Francine's lower back to press her up against her as Francine moaned in pleasure. "Even after all these years, I still got it," Linda thought as used every experience she had during her experimenting from college with her female partners and used it to save Francine. Unknown to the occupants in the parking lot, Naruto had just arrived to the scene due to the ladybugs closing up the streets with their connections. As he arrived at the parking lot on foot, he noticed what was happening and saw Linda and Francine in a deep embrace, while it brought back the memories of his own personal deep embrace with Francine. "No wonder she wouldn't cheat on her husband with another man," Casey said in amazement seeing the two women embrace. "You know, sweeties, this is pretty juicy dirt we have on her," Katie said with a smirk. "Okay, Francine, we'll let you live since I believe we are even, but if you want to keep it that way then you will keep those pictures hidden. If you don't we'll out you faster than Katie goes through Vicodin," Christy said as Katie practically swallowed a full bottle of Vicodin pills down to prove their point. As the ladybugs left, Linda broke the embrace, leaving Francine in a daze with her eyes glazed over and having some drool coming out of her mouth while Linda got her out of her binds. "Francine, thank goodness you are safe," the two heard as they turned and saw Naruto run over to them and gave them both a hug, which they didn't mind since they felt Naruto up against them. "Linda, what are you doing here?" Naruto asked as Linda blushed a bit. "Duh, it's Wednesday, our grocery shopping day," Linda said with a smile, getting Naruto and Francine to remember that she was right. With all that was going on they forgot that it was their shopping day. "Huh, isn't that funny? I thought my boring routine was killing me, but it ended up saving my life. And that fake lesbian embrace, what a great idea," Francine said as Linda felt a little off about that. "Fake? Yeah, of course it was," Linda said nervously as she rubbed her arm before she felt that she needed to get this feeling off of her chest as she gathered her courage and decided to stop hiding everything. "Francine, that wasn't a fake lesbian embrace. I have had a massive crush on you as well as Naruto ever since the block party a while back and I decided I've had enough of it, she said as she pulled Francine in for another embrace before she broke it and quickly pulled Naruto into a deep embrace as well before breaking away. Man, it feels so DMN good to finally get that off of my chest, woo, feels like so much weight just flew right off, Linda said as she was in a bit of a rush and so happy on what she just did. Naruto and Francine were in a bit of a daze before she looked over to him and chuckled. You think she could join as well? She whispered to him as he chuckled and sighed before shrugging. This didn't escape Linda's hearing as she caught on what they just said. Join what? Oh my god, you were having an affair with Naruto, weren't you? Linda asked, shocked as Francine shook her head. And no. Not yet. No, Francine stuttered out as Naruto calmed her down and looked at Linda. How about you join us as we go to my house? Would be best if we can explain from there since there needs to be a long talk between a lot of us, he said as he led them to his car while he texted everyone in his group telling them he needed to talk with them all urgently. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 5. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Dragon from Heaven on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.